Hey guys, so wanted to do this a little before work. I know you're thinking, oh, you're doing this on Friday? Technically not, this is on Thursday. The reason I'm doing this now is so that I can get some content out to you guys for Friday, the day you're watching this. But anyway, I wanted to talk real quickly about something that I've been kind of, pontificating for a while, kind of, just been thinking about for some time, and I don't think a lot of people really kind of grasp that even though 2022 has a lot of anniversaries to go along with it, there's one anniversary in wrestling some people seem to overlook. With the fact that, DX is celebrating 25 years, since their formation, I think a lot of people are forgetting that 25 years ago, around this time frame, actually about 2 months ago, or a month and a half ago, late August, but more so around this time frame and going into November next month, it'll have been 25 years since the whole setup for Sting and Hollywood Hogan took place. That's right. Basically in late August, and you can look this up on YouTube because I think they even have a playlist of it as well. In late August, it was announced via phone by J.J. Dillon, while Eric Bischoff was in the ring with Gene Okerlund. And it was announced by J.J. that he will do whatever it takes in his power to make that match happen. Well, as we got closer to Starrcade, more information, storyline-wise, and everything was coming together, and eventually, around this time and in November, we got the confirmation that we were hoping for, and that's Hogan against Sting. Now you might ask yourself, well, didn't Hogan and Sting face off before? Yes, they did. In fact, they faced off about 2 years prior, as a matter of fact, when Hogan was still a babyface, but going through that dark phase in his feud with the Dungeon of Doom. And basically, when you hear stories about why they did that, it was to test the waters of a potential heel turn that they weren't, too keen on at the time and didn't really go through with until now, or until this time frame about a year later, or a little less than a year later, half a year later. But anyway, yeah, they did face each other before. They had faced each other before, but that was the only time. And it was on Nitro. And it was to play into the storyline of whether or not Hogan was going to the dark side, or, he was just letting the Dungeon of Doom get to him because basically he didn't know what to do. It's like, who could he trust, who would side with him, stuff like that. Anyway, the difference here is, of course, as we all know, Hogan did what he did at Bash at the Beach 96, and the rest is history. So for a while, it was always pretty much pitched and booked for the NWO to look dominant. Like WCW on occasions would get some major wins here and there, but most of the time the NWO would just run roughshod, right? Anyway, the decision was made that, you gotta culminate this whole situation with Sting and Hogan. And that's what they did. But how do you get there? Well, the way they did it, I thought, from the beginning to the time we got the match at Starrcade 97, I thought was brilliant. I mean, yeah, it was a risky take by Eric Bischoff to do, because basically he was having Sting not really get too much physical. What I'm trying to say is, Eric Bischoff was taking a risk by not having Sting not get too physical in the ring. In other words, not have a match or anything, but show up when needed. And the way they worked it was, you were always questioning, okay, whose side is he on? Because we all know that basically about a week before Fall Brawl 96, Jeff Farmer, whose last role in WCW was the Cobra, opposite of Sergeant Craig Pittman, who was his rival, was tasked with being the fake Sting. And the way they filmed it and everything on that edition of Nitro worked out perfectly because it was raining outside, it was dark, so you couldn't really tell, especially in story, whether or not that was a real Sting or a fake Sting. So when Fall Brawl came around, and the match happened, the War Games match happened, out came the fake Sting to comprise NWO, Team NWO, right? Even though a lot of folks would be like, wait a minute, there's a little something off about this guy. His hairstyling's a little different. He's got the face paint and everything, but his hairstyling's different. Yes, he's doing everything Sting does, but there's something a little off about him. And then all of a sudden, when it's WCW's turn to get their last guy in there, out comes the Sting. Out comes the legit Sting, who basically starts kicking ass, but then leaves and tells everybody, to, stick it, if you will, and then kind of repeats that on Sunday by saying, you all can stick it, and he leaves and thus kind of makes himself a free agent in story. But in actuality, he did this basically over time, from, making people wonder, okay, whose side is he on, what's his motivation, what is it going to take for WCW to get him back on their side? I mean, the last time Sting spoke before he went all silent crow on everybody was when he said, the one sure thing about Sting is nothing's for sure. And then he went into silent crow mode, being in the rafters and all that, appearing down the aisle. And again, it all played into the fact that nobody knew what his agenda was going to be, what his agenda was, whose side was he on, what's his motivation, until we got into 97. And even then, in the early portions of 97, that was still being asked about. But then we get into the mid portion of 97, and we start seeing more and more and more, of Sting doing what he's been doing. We see more and more and more of it, right? We start seeing Sting, show what his motivation is, show what his agenda is, right? And eventually, this all led to the conclusion that Sting wants Hogan. J.J. Dillon wanted to offer him a contract, tried everything to get him back on the roster. It's like, what is it going to take? And all the fans pretty much knew. You didn't have to tell the fans anybody. They do is just chant Hogan's name. Sting would point out with his bat or with his finger, take a couple of signs away, or take a couple of signs from the audience and say, this is what I want. And eventually, we got that segment that I mentioned where J.J. Dillon, via phone, told the world, along with Bischoff and Oakland in the ring, he will do whatever it takes to make that match happen. And of course, Bischoff did not want it to happen, but he ended up being confronted by Sting, who actually, after he kind of humiliated Bischoff a little bit, cracked a bit of a smile. Like, he knew he was finally going to get what he wants, after all this time, that this is what's going to take, that this matchup is what it was going to take to get him back in the ring. And I like the way, and overall, I like how they, like I mentioned, I like how they kind of, played into this and built it up, because the moment J.J. Dillon, made that announcement, and the moment you would see Sting basically when he would fight off the NWO, just basically beat the hell out of all of them. Like, hey, they would try to attack him, but it'd be like, nothing phases him. The moment that announcement was made and Bischoff acted the way they did, that's when everybody knew, if they wasn't clued in at the time, that the NWO wanted to avoid Hogan taking on Sting, because in story, they knew Sting would be the only one that could legitimately beat Hogan and start cracking the NWO down to its core. In other words, Sting was basically the key to dismantling the NWO from within, from a storyline standpoint. And that's why when you would see the NWO go after him, but get the hell beat out of them, when you see Bischoff's reaction and everything, and how fearful he was of him, and even, like I said, the NWO members, and to an extent later on Hogan, it's because they knew this was the one guy, despite some of the victories WCW got over them, like Luger beating Hogan, which only lasted for about a week when he became champion. that with all those victories here and there, that this would be the one victory WCW would need to basically beat the NWO and thus kind of shake them up. Basically, take them, finally, put them down and make them realize, you're not as good as you say you are. You're just like everybody else. So, get over it, kind of deal. But in the end, yeah, the match, I will admit, probably wasn't the best and everything, but it did lead to a rematch of Super Brawl. With Sting won again. But I'm gonna give it credit from a storyline perspective. I thought it was very well built up. It was a risk that they took, but it's a risk that in the end paid off, and I don't think we can deny that whatsoever. But what do you guys think? What do you think about this overall? What were your thoughts when they started doing this? What were your thoughts originally, I should say, when you saw them start doing this? What were your thoughts when you were trying to wonder, okay, where are they going with it? And then you found out exactly where they were going with it. How did you feel initially when it happened, when it took place, and when it was announced? Also, looking back on it, how do you feel about it now? Do you think the build-up was decent enough? Do you think it was a risk that, even though it was a big risk to not have Sting competing, it was something that paid off, in the end? Let me know what your thoughts are down below, guys. Comment if you like the video. Super chat, super stickers are open during the live chat. Super thanks after the premiere of the video. Like me on Facebook at Brian Walmer. You'll find me there. Also, like me on Twitter at BWRoses, just like here. Also, check me out at Venmo at Brian-Walmer-2, Cash App at BWRoses98, Patreon.com/BWRoses, a $1, $3 tier. Also, check me out at VENMO for content you can't get anywhere else at BW Roses, and at my BW Roses discussion podcast, or at all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. Also, check me out at my Teespring store for merchandise you can't get anywhere else, and check me out at my DeviantArt page at BVW1979. But give me your thoughts, guys, overall. What were your thoughts initially when you first saw it as a fan? And looking back on it, do you think it paid off, even though the risk was a big one that they were taking with Sting not competing that much into that match? Let me know down below. Oh, and in the live chat. Until next time, guys, I got to get into work, and I'll talk to you later.